Welcome to Move Your Mind. My name's Nick Bracks, and this is a podcast where we have real conversations with real people and give real advice. In this episode, I spoke to Dr. Carmel Harrington, who's one of the top sleep experts in Australia. She talked about sleep and the correlation with mental health and the many health benefits of looking after your sleep. I hope you enjoy. Carmel, thank you so much for coming and having a chat to me on Move Your Mind. This is actually our second chat. The first chat we had, we covered a lot of really interesting things that I hope come up again today, but unfortunately had a few technical errors. So ironed all of that out. We've got about 15 recording devices happening here, so there should be no problems. But I really appreciate you making the time to come and talk to me again. Thank you so much for doing it.
Nick, it's my pleasure. So thank you for having me on your series.
So before we go into it, can you give us a little bit of a background on yourself? And it doesn't have to be, going into too much detail because I know you've done a lot. Just more an overall background of sort of where you've come from and how you've got to doing, what you do today in working in educating people on sleep.
It's really interesting, isn't it, how long life is. You don't realise when you're 18 how many twists and turns can happen in your life and take you to a completely different place. So I started life after school as a biochemist, and then I went into law, particularly medical litigation. So that was really interesting for a while. And then I became very interested in sleep. And so I decided to wander off and do my PhD in sleep, especially pediatric sleep, and I became quite fascinated in this area. Along the way, though, I started working with different companies and doing lecture tours with them, and I became very interested also in adult sleep. And as a result of that, I felt, being more and more exposed to the general public, I realised what a limited access people had to understanding the processes of sleep. The general public had really no idea about sleep. So I wrote two books, one in 2012 and one in 2014, trying to bring the story of sleep to people and help them understand how they can triage their sleep to give themselves a better sleep. And as a consequence of that, I have moved into the education domain as well. So I continue to research sleep, but I'm also very keen on raising awareness and educating people on what they need to do to give themselves a good night's sleep, because I believed 20 years ago that sleep was fundamental to our good health, and I have only increased that viewpoint more and more as I've understood what sleep gives us and what it enables us to do.
Yeah, massively. And it's something we're starting to hear more and more about in mental health now, like you're saying, how sleep has such a huge impact on so many parts of our physical and mental well-being. And, I find it fascinating that I guess we've always known that we need enough sleep, but there really hasn't been a lot of talk about the fundamentals of it, how we can approach it and the impacts that it has. And it seems to me like the same as in the mental health area, that there is simply just not enough mainstream education available on sleep and how we can, understand what are the practical things that we can do. Do you feel like that is an issue, and are there practical things we should be more educated on to be putting into our daily lives to collectively, make a change in our well-being?
Absolutely. I often think, and I talk about this, I think we're in a similar era that we were way back in the mid-70s. So many of your audience won't remember this, but in the mid-70s, there was a general education campaign, a government-led education campaign advertising about Norm Life Be In It campaign. And so Norm had to get off the couch and start exercising. And if we contextualize that into that era, in the early 60s, that's when everyone started to get the car. Before that, you used to run for the bus and walk to school and all that sort of stuff. But between early 60s, early 70s, that 10-year period, people lost incidental exercise. Now, we never understood how important exercise was until we lost it. And then, of course, we recognised the health impacts on people when they weren't exercising. And then if we move 10 years on to the mid 80s, there was another public health campaign. It was called Norm, the More of Less Diet, because 10 years before that, and people don't remember this, there weren't supermarkets, there were no fast food outlets. So getting food and eating food was an effort in itself. So we didn't have access to food 24/7, which we do now. And certainly by the mid 80s and early 90s, we were seeing the health impacts of people having access to food 24/7, processed food, with very little effort to get it. And so we had to educate people about food, because beforehand we didn't need it because we had limited supply. So now it would be very unusual to meet a child, even less than 5, who didn't understand that exercise and good food were important. So they would know to take the apple instead of the chocolate. They may not always choose to do that, but they actually understand the principles behind it. So fast forward to today, we've actually lost sleep. Now, we didn't know sleep was important until we lost it. And when did we lose it? Probably about 10 years ago, when the phone, our mobile devices, became ubiquitous. We are on them 24/7. So we've lost the discipline around sleep, and all of a sudden we think, what have we lost? How do we get it back? But in the same way we had to be educated about exercise and food, we now have to be educated about sleep. And I know our peak body in sleep is actually lobbying the government to give a general health campaign around the importance of sleep, and especially so, as you mentioned, in mental health, because lots of people don't recognize that connection. And we now know, most people recognize that if you do have poor mental health, you probably have sleep issues. But for many, many years, it was thought that it was just a unidirectional relationship. Mental health issues caused sleep issues, but we now know that if you have sleep issues, you're actually up to 5 times more likely to develop a mental health issue. Right? So it's bi-directional, that relationship, and we really need to start to help people get good sleep so they don't go on to develop a mental health issue.
Which is that's a massive statistic, and
yes.
I presume that it's a vicious cycle as well, where you could be predisposed to having a mental health issue that leads to lack of sleep from stress and being overwhelmed, which then compounds and the problem becomes worse. Or you could actually be not predisposed to having mental health problems, but because of lack of sleep, you develop a mental health problem, that becomes worse. So it's sort of, whatever way you look at it, it is going to have an impact on our mental health.
Absolutely. And in fact, we often think that people have a predisposition to more poor mental health. Yes, that's true. But a lovely piece of research looked at people with no indication of poor mental health at the start of a study period of 5 years. And all they recorded was their sleeping pattern at that time. And over that period of time, as I said, they were much more likely, the people who had sleep issues were much more likely to develop an overt and obvious mental health problem. And there was no other indicator except for everything else was accounted for in this research study. So we know that it's not that you may well be genetically predisposed. We know that is the case. But other times it is your environment which will increase your vulnerability to developing mental health problems, yeah.
And then on top of that all, I guess, and this is part of the environment, the things that you were mentioning before, the just 24/7 mobile phone technology use. And, I'll put my hand up here and, I'm a mental health advocate and I am good with a lot of things. I exercise every day, I meditate, I have routines that I follow. I do a lot of things that are good for me, but sleep's one of the things that I still have not completely got on top of. And the biggest thing for me is that I just find it so relaxing to be up at night time, and I'll be lying in bed, you got your phone there, you're texting your friends, watching a film on Netflix, and I'll have these screens, I'll be looking at these screens right up until I go to bed. And on top of that, it means that my bedtime when I go to sleep is varied every night because it depends on what I'm doing, and I presume that's not good.
That's right. So one of the things we forget about, this has even changed. So in our grandparents' day, there was no television in bed. What, you know, we say, look, it's just such a gimme health sleep behavior. The bedroom is for intimacy and sleep, and that's it. And so in our grandparents' day, that wasn't an issue. That's all it was used for, you know. But now we've got everything happening in our bedroom, and it's just so exciting a place to be. But we need to associate our bedroom with where we go to be nurtured and nourished, and not to work, not to be stimulated, because that's meant to be our cave. And 50 years ago, that's what it was. But it's so totally changed now. And so what starts to happen? And people are well aware that we are very conditionable animals, aren't we? You know, humans can condition themselves to anything. So what happens is when we start going to bed and watching TV or calling people or looking at the latest news or whatever we're doing on our devices, our brain starts to associate that environment with wakefulness. And so once your brain is associating something with wakefulness, it finds it very difficult to access the sleep pathways, because sleep pathways and wakefulness pathways are luckily mutually exclusive. We don't want to be, asleep when we're meant to be awake and things like that. So one of the most basic things I work with people is to start demarcating territory in your house and in your living environment. Where do I sleep? Where am I entertained? And where do I eat? I mean, hopefully people can, just by putting it, even if you don't have a big apartment, just by having, this is a table that I eat at, this is the couch that I watch TV, and this is the bed I sleep in, and making sure they're sacred spaces, each of them. Mm.
And you know what? That's and we were chatting about this before we started recording. That is so important in right now in the world where people are stuck working from home. If we don't separate areas, I mean, it's hard enough just not having the routine of leaving the house and, going and doing your activities and coming back. Right now, so many people are being forced to work from home, and it's critical that we have those routines where the bedroom is where we go to, like you're saying, to nurture ourselves, have a working area, have a relaxation area. Otherwise, it's overwhelming.
It is, and it is really a factor of what does our brain associate with what. And if we're not allowing our brain to recognize that, but our brain and body love routine. Nothing better than routine. And that's one of the things people have lost in this lockdown time, because it doesn't matter that you're not up at 6 o'clock in the morning getting ready to go to work and being at work at 9 o'clock. You get ready according to when's the next Zoom meeting, when's the next conference call on the phone. So you may not have a meeting till 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. So often people start to sleep in. Now sleeping, that's beautiful, that's really lovely, but it does affect our ability to sleep that night. So people need to understand that process in itself, like the body clock. So the body clock works quite beautifully, and it's very harmonious. As long as we know about it, we can work well with it. So the way it works is melatonin is our master hormone, but it's also critical in the story of sleep. So when we expose ourselves to dim light or fading light or darkness, that information is fed from the eye to the back of the brain. So in the brain, there's a pineal gland, and it starts to produce melatonin. And about an hour and a half after we start to produce melatonin, we're ready to go to sleep, if we're in a position to do so. Then we sleep, and then when we wake up and expose ourselves to light, immediately our brain, eye again, detects light. It stops production of melatonin straight away. Now that's when our clock is set for the next 24 hours. So at the point that you wake up, and you might wake up, say, at 7 o'clock in the morning, as an adult, you'll be ready to go back to sleep about 16 hours later. So if you wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, you'll be ready to go to sleep at 11 p.m. that night, provided you've exposed yourself to dim light that night. So what's happening right now, and for your example, when you're on, watching Netflix or whatever, here you have a very bright screen in front of you. So your eye, to start off with, is not detecting dim light. So it's not producing melatonin. And so when you turn the light out, ready to go to sleep, you might go to sleep really quickly because you're so tired, but you'll wake up a couple of sleep cycles later, wide awake. Then, of course, you
Mm.
have not a great night's sleep. So you think, oh, I haven't got a meeting till 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to wake up till 9 o'clock. So then you wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning. And of course, your body clock isn't ready to let you go to sleep till 1 o'clock in the morning. And so this terrible cycle starts to happen. And so people start to recognize their sleeping patterns gone really bad. And it's not long after that that they really start to struggle with their mental health because it's all over the
Mm.
place. Yeah. So we're seeing that spiral probably more in this second lockdown that Victorians are
Mm.
experiencing. But as a consequence of what's happening in Victoria, I think a lot of Australians are going, oh gosh, what's going to happen now? And we're all becoming very cautious. And that spiraled into really struggling with our ability to be happy and joyous and engaged and motivated is really being impacted.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think, and people going into another lockdown now, it's sort of taken away so much. Um, Not that there was a lot of certainty before it, but it's really put them into this turmoil where I think routines are getting completely thrown out the window by a lot of people at the moment, thinking, "Oh, well, what's the point of anything? I'm just gonna," and then exactly what you're talking about happening will start to happen, where your mental health declines. So
And then
it's
it
just
becomes
yeah.
a terrible vicious circle. So, one of the things I'm really recommending for people right now is write things down. Give yourself a plan for the day because if you don't, even as simple as I get up at 7 o'clock or whatever time you want to get up, actually recognize that. Then I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to do some exercise, or I'm going to jump on a conference call and have my breakfast. So keeping eating times fairly constant is also important because it's not just light that gives us the melatonin and a setting a body routine. It's also when we eat. So that sets the body clock quite nicely as well. So some people
Mm.
find that they're sleeping later and their first meal of the day is like lunchtime and the whole body starts to go all over the place. So try to keep that very regular, but making a plan for your day or, maybe for the week. Actually, when you lose discipline and routine, you can look at the plan and think, oh, okay, that's what I'm going to do now. You don't have to think too much about it.
Revert back to it. Yeah, exactly. And I really like that. I mean, I know that's going to help me. What you said before with the whenever you wake up, it's sort of roughly 16 hours until you should go back to bed. That sort of, yeah, I think having a bit of a structure around it and understanding that helps me because otherwise like the examples you were saying before, would sleep in occasionally, sometimes up really early, all these odd hours, and it just, you find it hard to keep that routine. So I guess on that topic, are there sort of some guidelines in the sense of, I guess, turning screens off whatever amount of time it is, an hour or two beforehand? Like things like alcohol, that's probably not going to be good for us when we're trying to get a regular sleep routine. And I'm sure alcohol is being probably used more by people than ever right now, again, with all this uncertainty in the world. How much water should we be drinking? Are there some sort of guidelines that we should be following here?
Yes, there certainly are. So with screens, an hour beforehand
An hour before.
is a
Okay.
minimum, really. But if, of course, some people are, I mean, sometimes I'll say that hour beforehand. People say, "Oh, it doesn't worry me at all," and fair enough. If it doesn't worry you, doesn't affect your sleep, that's okay. But good sleep behaviors are important to adopt for all time because we will always have a time in our life that's going to be a bit traumatic. There's something's going to be going on, a relationship breakup, problems at work with the children or whatever, and at those times sleep becomes problematic. And if you've got the best sleep behaviors already, you're going to have minimize your risk of having sleep disruption. So 1 hour before bedtime is really important. And then, of course, people say, "Oh no, I've got the lovely the blue filter." They love that
Yeah.
blue filter, and so you have to explain to them that something else is going on with the screen. So you're not necessarily just watching a light; you're also quite engaged. Okay, so when
Mm.
you're not doing it because you're disengaged. So not only you got your light, but you're highly motivated and engaged. So when you are highly motivated and engaged with what's going on, you've got these wonderful wakeful hormones going around, your adrenaline, your cortisol. It's making you feel great and invigorated. But guess what? They're not great things to be having
Mm.
pumping around your body at 9 o'clock at night. So you've got to recognize that it's not just the blue screen, the blue light, it's also your interest and engagement with the device itself. So switch off 1 hour beforehand. Now, often people go, oh, 1 hour beforehand, what am I going to do 1 hour, before I go to bed? Well, there's lots of things you can do. You can start to breathe, start to relax, recognize that you're getting your body ready to be nurtured for the next 8 hours. So get in that zone, and you can it's really a good thing to get in the habit of having a warm to hot shower prior to going to bed, because our body likes to fall asleep on a falling temperature. And our peak temperature for in a 24-hour period is around about 7 p.m. Of course, it varies a little bit depending on what we call it, your chronotype. But around about 7 p.m. and from then on, your temperature starts to fall. And so by having a warm to hot shower at, say, 9 o'clock at night, you're enhancing that falling temperature. And so the body thinks, oh, it's time to go to sleep. A relaxation exercise, a breathing exercise, there's lots of guided yoga, meditations, things like that you can do in that 1 hour before bedtime that can be really beneficial to you. Of course, make sure you're sitting or in an area that the lights are dim, okay? No bright overhead lights, no big TV screens on. So start to get into that zone. It's really important. And as you said, alcohol is a sleep stealer, which is really unfortunate because sometimes people are using it, especially now, to let them relax,
to relax
at the end of the day. And look, 100 mils of wine probably is not going to impact your sleep. The trouble is, though, people often have one glass and then they get into the second glass and they're having quite a nice time. They have a third glass and they're not going out anywhere, so they think, what difference does it make? But of course, it will impact your sleep, and you won't be able to, you'll fall asleep but wake up 5 hours later unable to get back to sleep. And of course, be aware of your caffeine use. That's really important. And as we age, caffeine hangs around the body for much longer, so probably after 2 or 3 p.m. If you're over the age of 40, you shouldn't be really drinking coffee after that time. Nice herbal teas. Beware of green tea. That can be quite a stimulant, so you don't have that late at night either. And to your point of exercise, that's really important to good sleep. So yeah, that's really, really, and research after research shows that those people who exercise the most actually get the best sleep, because the body, I can't stress enough how harmonious the body is. And so what we do when we sleep is repair and build our muscle and restore our body. And so if we are exercising, that feeds back very quickly to the brain. The brain understands, okay, I've got to give you more sleep tonight because I have to repair and restore your body. And so when you do exercise every day, you actually enable your body to get that lovely deep sleep. In the same way, if we want to get more dream sleep, or our rapid eye movement sleep is the same thing. If we start learning a language or a musical instrument or doing something completely new, and the memories have to be, when we bed down memories is at night, we expose ourselves to the memory during the day in our wakeful hours, but it's at night when we bed them down. And so when we observe people who are learning an instrument or something quite mentally challenging, they upregulate the amount of dream sleep they get. They get more of it because that's when we're bedding down all these memories. So there are things we can do to give ourselves a better quality sleep when we're in lockdown. Exercise, go walking, jumping on the spot for 5 minutes or whatever you want to do. I don't mind, but do that. And also, if you've got spare time, maybe take up learning a musical instrument or a language. Any of those sorts of things will actually give you better quality sleep, because our body recognises, especially our brain, recognises the need for these different types of sleep.
Yeah, giving ourselves that stimulation, I guess, challenging our mind so then it's ready to sleep at night. Because if we're not really, we're not feeling like we're sinking our teeth into anything, I guess it can become this just prolonged cycle where we're agitated in the daytime and then we're not tired enough to want to sleep at nighttime. I'm sure that's a big part of it. I guess the other part of what you were saying, what about waking up? I know it's a really common thing in the morning to wake up. The first thing that we often do is check our phone now, and then automatically when you check your phone, you look at social media, and then you're stuck in this. It traps you in, and I'm sure that's really bad as well.
Actually, I
Yeah.
have no problem with you doing it at that time of the day because when you expose
Right.
yourself to a bright light in the morning, that's the best thing you can do. However, what's really important is that you don't stay in bed on your device for half an hour or an hour. So, again, by
Right.
being on the device is fine, but hop out of bed, sit on the couch, whatever you want to do with that device at that time, because you're exposing yourself to that very bright light from the screen. So that's really good. But don't stay in bed because, again, your mind associates, your brain associates the bed with doing stuff. So the
Okay.
idea is don't stay in bed. And I mean, we know from good mental health behaviors that you don't want to be prolonged in bed in the morning because that then becomes very habitual. You become quite conditioned to that, and it can play havoc with your mental health and your preparedness to greet the day. So you've got to be careful about that.
Okay, great. Well, and that's interesting to hear, and I find it fascinating what you're saying with the dim light as well on the devices, because I have heard so much about that, and people downloading those different lighting settings on their phones and saying no, that's fine, I can keep looking at it. So that's really interesting to know that and it makes sense what you said. It's more. It doesn't really matter. You're still going to be stimulating yourself if you're watching and viewing material on your phone. So with that, just as a final part on this part of sleep, what about like within the hour before you go to sleep, reading a book? Is that too stimulating as well?
Now, a book can be actually very good. I sort of think let's go back to what our grandparents used to do, and they used to read a book, not a Kindle, but a book.
Mm.
And I know, again, people are very wedded to their Kindles and their devices when they're reading books, but I would recommend, and especially if you're having trouble with sleep, finding that you're having trouble getting off to sleep or trouble waking up in the middle of the night, you just get rid of all those things, go back to basics. Get a
Yeah.
novel. Don't start to read something that agitates you. So
Mhm.
maybe not. Don't read stuff about what's happening in COVID somewhere and things.
Don't read the news. Yeah.
Don't read the newspaper.
Avoid
I
that.
think, and again on that point, I really would recommend people they choose once a day to look at the news. They need to be updated about what's going on in the world, especially in these COVID times. But once a day is enough. You don't want to overwhelm your brain with information about it because you're not
Oh,
going to change what's going on, but you do need to be aware of what's going on. So just getting a novel that you like that makes you feel quite good takes you in another space. Actually, many studies have shown that those people who read a novel actually can fall into sleep much easier and they tend to have more dream because you've taken your brain away from the reality into a make-believe world of the novel, and so your brain's ready to go to sleep. So
mm.
yeah, that can be quite beneficial as well, but try to limit devices in that hour, Kindle, phone, whatever. Yeah.
That makes sense, and yeah, I think it's critical what you said as well. Where yes, we all need to stay informed, but limit how much we're taking in of news and media because it's never ending, and we're only going to agitate ourselves and hear the same message over and over again and create unnecessary fear when we've already got enough to deal with. So I think that's so important that people follow that.
Yes, and maybe not after 5 o'clock at night. So give yourself enough time after that time to just digest it and get your cortisol levels down after
Wind
you.
down a little bit.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
And I mean, we live in a culture where people, weekends, people drink. And, Friday night, it's, okay, the week's over, go on. People normally have a few drinks or end up getting quite drunk. And, it's a routine that a lot of people follow where the weekends they drink. If you did follow everything you're talking about, but then on the weekends you go through this, you drink, your sleeping's off, you sort of have that outlet, is that going to in turn affect sort of the overall routine that you're trying to follow?
Yes, absolutely. As again, what is happening is you're changing the routine for your body and your brain. So I know it's a well-worn pathway for Australians to, have a few drinks on the Friday night, and then if you don't have children or you don't have any imperative to get up on Saturday morning, you might sleep in. Okay, so
Mm.
especially if you've had too much to drink and you have poor sleep during the night, and then you go to sleep, and you don't wake up till 11 a.m. Say, you know, and you often see this in young people. So it's fine. You wake up at 11 a.m., but what have you done? Okay, you've set your biological clock to going to sleep 16 hours later. So if you get out of bed at 11 o'clock in the morning, you're not quite ready to go to sleep till 3 o'clock the next morning. Okay. Now
Yeah, yeah,
that often isn't a problem because on Saturday night people are out partying again, especially young people if they don't have to get up to children or anything else. So then comes Sunday and they wake up, they sleep in 11 o'clock, have a very slow start, maybe don't have breakfast till 12, midday. And then, of course, a lot of people are very conscientious when it comes to work. And they think, oh, I'm going to go to sleep really early tonight because I want to be really on the ball for the week. And I've had a really tough week last week. So they forget the fact they didn't wake up till 11 and their body clock's not ready to go back to sleep till 3. And so they go to bed, say, at 9 o'clock. They follow all the good sleep behaviours and then they toss and turn and toss and turn, and get anxious about not getting off to sleep, thinking, oh, I've got a really big week this week and I wanted to be really well slept and I'm not getting to sleep. And so they finally fall into a fitful sleep about, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, a lot of adrenaline and cortisol pumping through their body. And so they wake up feeling quite shattered on Monday morning. This is something we call social jet lag. And it's a really, really well recognized phenomena in the sleep world. And people actually don't understand why it's happening to them. They think they're getting no very poor sleep on Sunday night because they're anxious about work. That's not the reason at all. It's because they've changed their routine and set their biological clock at a completely different time on the weekend than is required for their weekday. So if and of course we're going to have good time partying or whatever you want to do, but always be aware of how much alcohol you're having because that will affect your sleep. Don't vary your wake up time on the weekend by more than an hour. So if you regularly get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, you don't get up any later than 8 a.m. Of course, everyone's going to go, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through the day? So what you do is have on Saturday afternoon, you have a power nap. And a power nap for 20 minutes is fantastic in that lull that we have in the afternoon between about 3 and 5 o'clock. So have a 20-minute power nap, then you'll be ready to go for quite some time after that. It will refresh your body and not affect your ability to get to sleep that night, but limit it to 20 minutes. So we can use the power nap quite judiciously to get us through a couple of late nights on the weekend without actually affecting what time we wake up in the morning, which is really critical if you want to have good sleep the night before you go back to work on Sunday night.
yeah, definitely. And I've noticed in the past when I have been absolutely exhausted, and on a weekend, often have ended up having a bit of a nap, and you're lying around and you sort of don't feel fully recovered, but you sort of, it's much longer than the 20-minute power nap, and then by nighttime, I'm tired. By the time I go to bed, wide awake, and then you wait and you can't sleep, and I guess it's the exact process that you just explained before, where you've completely thrown all these patterns out the window and your body wants rest, but then it doesn't really know what it's out of whack with everything.
Yeah, and so just by knowing that, what I think is important in all of this, and is why I've started educating and writing books and things like that, is people need to know what are the effects of the decisions they're making. That's all. So you know now about what goes on. You might choose not to pay attention to it one weekend for one reason or another, but it's not going to beguile you anymore. You're going to say, well, that's why I'm not sleeping, because I've done this, this, and this. It isn't a mystery anymore. And so one of the things we need to do is have autonomy over our decisions. But autonomy means that we understand what we're doing as well. It's not just random decision making. The same way as I'm sure you make good decisions about your exercise. You know what you're doing, and you make good decisions about your food. And you might choose not to follow them for a day or so, or whatever you want to do, but at least you know whether it's a good decision or a bad decision, and then you can make choices on top of that, pursuant to that.
Absolutely. I think, the biggest thing out of this that I'm learning is we just need more mainstream education on sleep. That's the big thing. And eating, should we be eating? Is it about 2 hours before we go to bed?
Yeah, certainly. Well, actually, 2 hours if you're young, but over the age of 40, really 3 hours between
Okay.
your last meal. There's nothing wrong with a small snack if you sort of are hungry, but your body is very busy digesting food, and really we eat upside down. We should be having our largest meal of the day for breakfast, and then we have a smaller meal lunch and a very small meal for dinner. But we don't do that. So being aware that we have often our largest meal of the day in the evening. So make sure there's at least 3 hours between when you finish your meal and when you expect bedtime. Now, as I say, if you're younger, it's probably 2 hours because your metabolic rate is higher. But what will happen if you have, some people will recognize this sometimes if they go out to dinner and they have a really long meal and they finish quite late, they'll feel like they actually don't get to a deep sleep. They'll be sleeping, tossing and turning, and they'll think, oh, I had such an unconsolidated sleep. So what happens is your body's so busy digesting the food, you stay in light sleep. You don't go into your deep sleep. We don't get much good deep sleep or dream sleep. So you tend to stay in your light sleep so the body can continue to digest that food that the huge amount of food that you've given it. So just be aware of when you finish your meal. But as I say, there's nothing wrong with having a small snack. And especially as we age, a lot of people report needing to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. So one of the things we need to do is to stay hydrated during the day. Okay, that's really important. Make sure you're having your water or your herbal teas or whatever you have to keep hydrated during the day, but don't have anything to drink within 2 hours of bedtime. That will minimize your vulnerability to having to get up during the night to go to the bathroom and disturb your sleep that way. So for some of us, once we get over the age of about 40, we need to stop having that cup of tea just before bedtime or whatever, and just recognize that that's going to disrupt your sleep if you do that.
Yeah. Yeah, really important. So just more the following that regular, hydrating ourselves regularly rather than trying to really cram it all in before we go to bed, and definitely and no more, which, one of my favorite things to do when I'm stressed is lie in bed at night time with movies and snacks and all that kind of thing. So no more of that.
Yeah, try not
or
to.
do it.
Yeah.
Try and do it during the day, or not directly before bed.
No, that's not going to work.
It's not, and it brings me to another point. I'm a big follower of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He's big actor, ex-pro wrestler, hugely into his health and fitness.
Yes,
and he's posting all these things. I talked about it with you last time, and he's always posting about how he only sleeps for 3 or 4 hours a night, and then I think we spoke last time as well. Donald Trump, US president, sort of talks about how he barely sleeps and he's up tweeting in the middle of the night. And you hear about these different people, these public figures that are high achievers that talk about how they don't really get much sleep, and how you got to, some of them advocate for conditioning yourself to try and get by with less sleep so you can get more done. I know for myself that doesn't work. I shut down. I can't think clearly if I don't get at least 6 or 7 hours. My brain's not functioning. I get way less done. So I tried to do it. It didn't work for me, and I'm sure it does for some, doesn't for others. But what do you have to say about that? And is that sort of could be a bit dangerous to try and condition ourselves to not sleep enough?
I think it's really sad that we have people advocating this and holding themselves out as that, look at me, I'm not doing this. So the harsh reality is that about 2% of the population are short sleepers. They've got a gene, and it allows them to do everything they need to do in sleep in the 5 hours. They need 5 or 6 hours, whereas the other 98% of the population needs somewhere between 7 to 9. That's the reality. There's another 2%, so it's about 96 of the population, 6% of the population need between 7 to 9. Another 2% of the population need more than 9. They've got the long sleep gene, so they got the short straw. So they actually need more time. So the big test is, how do I feel when I wake up in the morning? How am I able to meet the joys and challenges of the day? And if I'm not able to be joyous or happy, or I'm unmotivated, or I'm finding thinking difficult, or my good health is suffering, then chances are you're not getting enough sleep. However, if you're waking up after 5 hours and achieving what The Rock is doing, he might well be a short sleeper, but the vast majority of us are not. And on Trump, he's not a short sleeper. He's a wannabe short sleeper. He's probably got very poor sleep behaviors. I don't know him personally, but I'm not sure whether anybody would want to follow his leadership style or his decision making style. He's
I hope not.
overweight. He appears to be hypertensive. So he has all the behavioral characteristics, the cognitive characteristics, and the physical characteristics of being sleep deprived, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So if you want to be Donald, I mean, he's a highly successful man without it. I mean, he's president, so he has achieved an amazing amount. But I think there's been enormous cost, not just for him, but for everybody else.
I hope most of us don't want to be like him, but I
Well,
can't
that's
speak for
right.
everyone.
So everyone has a choice, but I do think you need to recognise what I mean, another well-known short sleeper in Australia was Kevin Rudd, or is well,
Right.
he has always spoken about only needs 4 or 5 hours sleep. Now he might be a short sleeper genetically, but if his own party got rid of him because he was difficult to work with, he's indecisive. It was publicised as his being
Yeah.
a bit easily annoyed, and so they're the behavioural characteristics of poorly slept people. And so just be aware that poor sleep really impacts our ability to have healthy, good relationships, to be able to communicate well with people, to be physically well, to be mentally well and engaged and motivated. So it affects all those really, really fundamental aspects of what makes me me. So when I don't get enough sleep, I'm just like you, Nick. I think I'm cranky. I'm
Yeah.
impatient. I don't think very well. And I change. I'm not happy. I'm not engaged. I'm not motivated. All of those things. And yet when I'm well slept, I think I am that person. I'm, the highly motivated, happy, active person. And so I often say to people, sleep has the power to make me less of me, to change the essence of me. And so that's really a powerful thing, isn't it?
Oh, it's a really powerful thing. It's it shows how it's one of the most important things that we get right. And I think it really feeds into this whole thing, and it's such a societal or Western world thing about we need to get more done, be productive, do more, and often trying to do more. There's only so much time we all have every day, and so much we can actually physically do. So often it's like it is that statement at the expense of sleep. Okay, sleep less, do more, stay up later, do all these things and overwhelm yourself. And I know, again, I can only go from my own personal examples, but for me, when I've tried to do that, it's had an adverse effect. Whenever I've simplified things and just really focused on more the quality rather than trying to do too much, you get better results. And that feeds into this whole sleeping thing. It's just, yeah.
Absolutely. And there's a study I always quote when I do talks, and it's great because I'm normally speaking to that the alpha personality. I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. I can't afford to sleep. I can't afford do anything. And so study after study shows me that you're less productive and you make more mistakes when you're sleep deprived. And it's a beautiful graph. They allow different groups of people, one group to sleep up to 9 hours, another up to 7, another up to 5, another up to 3. And as the week goes on, they mimic the work week. And as the week goes on, you can see this decrement in performance goes down, 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 down. And you can see this increase in mistake rate go up, 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 up. And so it's just fabulous. So you're talking to people who, much like you may have thought when you were a bit younger, oh, look, I haven't got time to sleep. I've got so much to do. I want to achieve so much. So the last thing I can do is sleep 8 hours. But in fact, the reality is the less sleep you get, the less sleep you can afford to get because it takes you longer to do exactly the same thing when you're sleep deprived. So, and you make more mistakes. And so you have to go back and rework things all the time. And there'll be people listening to this podcast who'll be reminded of someone they work with that by the end of the week they're ready to just throw them out of the office because they're making so many mistakes, but they're actually doing it really, really slowly as well. So not only you're doing things really slowly, you make many more mistakes. So that then feeds into the terminology of presenteeism. You are physically at your work or you're physically at your computer, but you're not really there. Your brain has gone AWOL because the heart, again, research shows that after about 16 hours, 18 hours maintained wakefulness, your cognitive function and your ability to react is equivalent to a blood alcohol level of 0.05%.
Wow.
Yeah, so your ability to perform has just dive bombed. But people don't like to know that because it means that they have to stop working.
Yeah, I think we don't like to realize that we are human and we do have limitations. I think it's something that we, again, from I can only go off myself, but I know I've tried to trick myself in the past thinking, no, I need to, I feel like I should be able to do more, or we want to believe we're superhuman. At the end of the day, no one is, and everyone's got limitations. So it's how do we work around those limitations to get the best out of ourselves rather than just grinding ourselves into the ground?
Well, I think first off, we have to recognize that we have 3 neurobehavioral states, okay? One is wakefulness. The other 2 is deep sleep, non-rapid eye movement sleep, and also our rapid eye movement sleep. So that's dream sleep and non-rapid eye movement sleep, non-REM. So we have 3 neurobehavioral states. Each of those neurobehavioral states are important to our ongoing good survival. So wakefulness, we do certain things that allow us to survive. In sleep, we do other things that allow us to survive. So we're meant to, as animals, every animal sleeps, and every animal sleeps. So what we have is this wonderful time of about 8 hours as adults that allows us to be fabulous for the other 16. And then we have 8 hours, another fabulous 16 hours. So we have to accept that we're not missing out on anything. In fact, by giving ourselves the 8 hours, it's allowing us to be fabulous for the next 16 hours. And we can't do that if we're only having 4 hours, and we can't be fabulous for 20 hours. Most of us cannot. Unfortunately, what's happening now is there's a lot of intensity around building wakefulness drugs. So we've gone back to the drug thing. So we've got all these wakefulness drugs that people who think, I don't want to sleep, so I'm just going to pop one of these pills. And they are out there. I'm not going to talk about them. And we don't know what the long-term effects of those wakefulness drugs are on people's long-term mental health and long-term physical health. So be very cautious. People are doing it. Yeah, but it can be, we don't know. And we often have been caught up in the situation 10 years later, and we say to ourselves, but we didn't know then. And no, we didn't know, but always be cautious. Yeah.
Well, and I think anything where, you're going to build a reliance on something artificial, long term, it's probably not going to be a great thing. And there definitely are scenarios where people need certain medications to deal with a specific thing. But I think using it, like you're saying, just in that, without really knowing what they're getting themselves into, that's probably not a well-advised thing to do.
Yeah, look, lots of people are recognising sleep issues. Melatonin is becoming really popular to have as a drug. But we don't know the long-term effects of that either. It's a master hormone. Yeah. We've never, ever in our history, ever taken a master hormone by pill, and we don't know the long-term effects. We think it's safe, but we don't know. But people don't recognise that they can give it to themselves every single day just by exposing themselves to dim light and darkness. Now, there's a few cases in which melatonin is really good. It can work, obviously, with sight-impaired people, and especially we use that in children. They need to be able to, because they aren't able to produce it very well themselves. Jet lag is good. It works for a lot of people in jet lag, and for shift workers who go from night to morning, shifts, and they have to rearrange their sleep. But other than that, I just urge caution. But I have come across a lot of people using melatonin.
Yeah, I can imagine. And what about oversleeping? Can that be a problem as well if we get too much of it?
Look, by and large, your body doesn't give you more sleep than it needs. Again, the body is very
Okay.
harmonious. However, there are situations where people will come and see me and they're sleeping a long amount of time and they still feel quite shattered. Okay, so they might be sleeping 9, 10 hours and they still feel horrible. Um, in that circumstance, there's a couple of things that can be wrong. Normally, it's a pathology with their sleep. So they might be having something like sleep apnea, the snoring disorder. They might have something called restless legs. And in fact, what's happening, they're not really getting great sleep. They're being woken up hundreds of times a night. They don't remember it the next morning. So they're not getting that good cemented, consolidated sleep. And they actually need to have a sleep study to diagnose a sleep disorder. People could have narcolepsy as well, which is a sleeping disorder. All of these things can be treated, but they have to be diagnosed in the first place. And other times it can be an indication of poor mental health. So we know people with depression will often sleep very long time. Again, this needs to be diagnosed and treated. And so if anyone listening to this is saying to themselves, well, I sleep, 10 hours a day and I still don't feel, fabulous in the remaining hours, then you need to talk to your healthcare provider and they may well facilitate a sleep study to find out exactly what's going on. Because if you are getting 9 hours sleep a night and you're still not going well with your sleep, or feeling tired during the day, you speak to somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that can be common where people are sleeping, 10 hours a night, but feeling exhausted. And a lot of the time in mental health, if you're suffering from acute anxiety or stress, that could be part of the problem. So it's really going and looking at and like you said, going and seeing a professional about this and trying to get to the bottom of the problem, not trying to self-diagnose or ask, friends for advice on it. Go and, try and get the professional help in those cases. I think it's really important.
It is, and just recognizing that
Yeah.
your body will give you, so 8 hours is as a medium point, but seven to nine, but there's nothing wrong with getting 9.5, 10. The big test is, how do I feel? If I feel great when I wake up and I'm so excited about life, that's good. But if I wake up feeling dreadful still and finding it really tough to get through the day, that's a big red flag to me that you need to talk to a healthcare provider about your sleep.
And for someone that is suffering from stress and anxiety, but wanting to get good sleep, I guess part of it as well is trying to do things like meditation, mindfulness techniques, the usual sort of stuff.
Yeah, look, there's some great things around these days to help. Sometimes there's fairly simple. So what happens oftentimes? So when we're getting poor sleep and we're really stressed and anxious, it becomes self-fulfilling, right? So there's a conditioning to the fact that people start to associate bed with wakefulness. So as soon as they get into bed, they're wide awake. They report to me, I can fall asleep on the couch, but as soon as I go into bed, I'm wide awake and can't get to sleep. And so we have to start changing that mindset as well. So there's a few things you can do, and there's what we call cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia, which is a particular process that we do. Guided meditations in the evening are really, really good. I particularly recommend some guided yoga nidra. They seem to work quite well. But using that hour before bedtime to relax and get yourself in that mind frame cannot be underrated. It really is important.
Yeah.
But exercise during the day as well. But if there is a problem, it's often you have to one thing at a time. Problems often don't come neatly packaged, do they? There's this big thing that you have to unpack bit by bit. And in the case of people with a lot of anxiety or stress, that's being exacerbated at the moment. Sometimes we just take one bit and then one bit and then one bit and we get there. But it's not, treating your sleep is often not like just taking a pill. It can take, a little bit of time. Not forever. It can take a little bit of time.
It can be complicated.
That's right.
There's lots of components. And I love that advice that you've given as well about if we're overwhelmed, there's often a multitude of things that are bothering us. So the natural reaction is, how do I try and deal with all these things at once? And we get more overwhelmed because we realize we can't and there's too many things. So step back, pick one, try and deal with that. Once you've got on top of that, then deal with the next thing. And if you do that, before you know it, you actually have dealt with, a huge chunk of what's bothering you. But we often get stuck in, again, these cycles that we just can't get out of.
And on that, you often forget when you improve a little bit, so when we have a problem, we want to be here, right? So this is where we were aiming for, but we've started here. And so when we have a problem, if we get to here, we often forget that we actually were down here in the first place because we're still not here. We're always looking forward. So I do recommend to people to take baseline information as well about what's going on in their life right now. How do they feel? How are they behaving? Things like that. So that the little wins are noticed. And if we notice the little wins, we become more encouraged, more motivated, because we can say, we've got this 10% improvement. It's not 100% improvement, but we've got a 10% improvement, which is better than nothing. And then in another couple of days' time, we might have a 20% improvement. So we need to because as humans, we're really quick to forget the little win because we want this big win, we want to be up here. So let's forget about this piddly stuff down here. But the piddly stuff is really important in treating things bit by bit by bit.
It's fundamental. And I think this next question will definitely scare people into wanting to do more about their sleep. Are there if we have chronic lack of sleep, can that lead to a shorter lifespan?
Yes. Unfortunately, sleep is so important. And we're much more likely to develop cardiovascular disease. We're much more likely to develop metabolic disease like type 2 diabetes. We're much more likely to develop, as I said, depression. And as we age, we're much more likely to develop dementia or cognitive decline. So we've got enormous impetus, really, to teach us. In the same way as we eat, if we eat poorly all our lives or we don't exercise, we know it affects our health when we turn 50, 60, 70, don't we? We know that. But people don't know that about sleep. And so there's 3 pillars of health. There's exercise, nutrition, and sleep. And without any one of those, it's like a 3-legged table, will topple over. There is an impact.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting depending on the audience I speak to, but sometimes when I'm speaking to an older age group and I'll say, well, if you don't get enough sleep, you're twice the risk of developing dementia and 3 times the risk of developing cognitive decline. You see this intake, oh my gosh, I better start sleeping right now. But the thing with sleeping right now, it's no good then. Like, so if you're 55, 60 and you decide, oh, now I'm going to get the sleep I need. What causes dementia, is a particular type of dementia, Alzheimer's, which people are aware of, is there's this formation of plaque, this sticky substance in the brain that forms plaque, and it's when we sleep that we rid our brain of this sticky substance, amyloid beta peptides, and so we do that when we sleep. Okay, so these sticky lumps start to form in our brain up to 20 years prior to the presentation of dementia. So we need to start sleeping right at your age, not when we get to 45 or 50, because we've done a lot of brain damage by then if we're not getting the right amount of sleep. So it's really important to keep that in mind, that sleep is so critical to our survival.
I think that's, such an important point, and relates to so many things in life, I think, when it comes to our health, that we're often good at being reactive, and when there's a problem, then doing the right things, which often it's too late. We need to, and this is why education, this is why what you're doing is so important, and why there needs to be more education about this, that it's not about being reactive, it's about educating ourselves in how can we do the right things every day, not just so we don't prevent these long-term negative health things happening to us, but so we can actually just get better quality of life day to day, but we often do wait until the problem is so bad that we have no choice but to take action. We don't want to do that.
Yeah, and it's such a huge cost, isn't it, then, at that point in time? Because if that's the point that you take action, it's in a pretty bad state, right? That's when we think, oh, we're in a really bad state, and it takes us a long time to regain where we need to be. But if we go back 6 months earlier or 12 months earlier, if only we'd started doing the right thing then, we would never have to get into this point where we're unraveling, a disastrous situation and a complete burnout. And it was interesting, in 2018, I think the UK General Practitioners Group did a study, and they found that burnout was highly associated with sleeping less than 7 hours, absent everything else. So if you're more likely to develop burnout if you're getting regularly less than 7 hours sleep. So, it's really important to keep that in mind.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And so for those of you...
Good one to know, yeah.
Yeah, but for people who are... And, I'm busy too. We're all busy, I guess. But one of the things you can do, if you're not able to get your 7 hours sleep every single night, you should get it as much as possible. But every third night, make sure you get at least 8 hours sleep. So reset that clock every third night. Don't let it go on forever and ever, like for 10, 20, 30 days, getting 6 hours sleep, because it's going to be a disaster. So every third day, try to reset that system and give your body exactly what it needs.
And there's so many apps out there now, and a lot of sleep apps. Are there any that you would recommend that are good? Like, I know for me, something where I could just something simple where I could just be logging and trying to discipline myself habitually to, go to bed and get up at the right times. Are there some that you can recommend to people listening to this?
Look, I don't really recommend apps because I think they're so particular and personal, what people enjoy. I think some guided meditations can be really helpful as well.
Yep.
I would warn against people listening forever. If you're listening to something at night to get you to sleep, make sure it switches off. So you don't want to keep listening to noise or music. So lots of people, there's some apps out there. The things I don't recommend are apps that just give you this music all night. It's not good. Your brain doesn't like to hear. The brain wants to feel safe. So you don't want to have that noise going on all night. But yeah, apart from that, I just would recommend people to investigate what might work for them and work with that. But there's a lot of aids out there, Nick. You're quite right. Yeah.
It can be almost overwhelming sometimes. There's too many.
Which is why I don't recommend anything, because I'm not up to speed all the time. Somebody will show me something. I think, oh, that's great, and it work. What is important is, does it work for you?
Well, what they can do is just listen to this episode, and you've given so much good advice in here. I'm going to be listening to it over and over again and trying to put all this stuff into practice myself. Are there and in closing, is a bit of a summary of just some, basics, daily tips to follow? What would you say, as a bit of a summary?
Well, my summary in all of this is sleep is a priority. Like, just accept that I need to sleep, and if I give myself the gift of sleep, I'm going to be the best version of me. And I think that's such an important message. I don't need to say anything more.
I like that.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful and it's simple, and just reminding yourself of that statement. It cuts through all the other noise about why we shouldn't and what can get in the way. Let's bring it back. And I think I really like that as well, because in this day and age, we need to simplify everything, because there's just too much noise out there. There's too many things, and it's what's contributing to all of these issues with our health and mental health and lack of sleep and everything else. If people want to learn more about you, and we'll put in the show notes, we'll have links for them to go to your website and wherever else. Where should we send them? Where can they go if they want to find more about what you do?
Just my website will redirect them to whatever they want, and there's some information on my website, and my books are on there as well if they want to get any books. That's
great. Yep. All right. Perfect. Well, we'll have links to all of that. We finish every episode up with these 5 closing questions, which I did ask you last time, but we'll do it again. It was a while back. And these can be, one line, sort of whatever comes to mind. So the first one is, what's your best childhood memory?
Well, I grew up in a large, I don't know if I told you this last time, but I grew up in a very large family, and you thought I was one of the younger ones. And I guess I laugh about this, and we laugh about it as siblings, because it would never happen in this day and age. So I remember on school holidays, and it would come, in the morning, and my mother would say to us all, "Don't think you're going to hang around here all day. Off you go. I don't want to see you until lunchtime." And off we'd go. And I can't imagine anything happening like that these days. And so all of us would just go wandering around the neighbourhood doing all these little adventures with, whatever sibling we were with. So I think that's hilarious when I put it into the context of today. So yeah, it's a lovely memory that we have.
Yeah, and it probably wouldn't happen today. And that's where creativity comes from. That's when you're a kid, you explore, you grow. I mean, we need more of that. It's a shame that we don't have more of that now.
No, there's so much. I mean, and parenting is like that. It's a highly anxious thing that we do these days. But I guess, have been one of seven, Mum probably couldn't look after all of us.
Physically couldn't do it. You can't keep up with that many people.
Go away. Leave me alone for the day. I can't cope. That's right.
Exactly. So what do you think currently is the biggest burden on mental health in society?
Well, I think it's just all this negativity. I mean, I find I'm really aware of, things, but, you turn around this coronavirus, and there's the political situation of the refugees in the world, there's climate change, there's all this stuff going on. They're big, big questions, and nobody knows how. Everyone wants to help, and nobody knows how to. And I think it's causing a lot of people so much stress, and not surprisingly, because that's what we get in our paper and news every single day. Well, that's what we're exposed to. And I think that feeling of helplessness in face of all these big issues, I think.
Yep. Yeah. It's never ending. In 10 years' time, do you see mental health in society improving, declining, staying the same, or maybe a bit of both? Where do you see that leading?
Well, I think there's going to be unfortunately, I can see the world moving into two tiers. There are the people that will be of your ilk, that think the world needs to slow down. I need to do this because that's what living is about. Living is about experiencing things and being there and being present. And then there's going to be another group of people that are constantly on this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And I just think it's going to turn out like that. And so there's going to be some good outcomes, and there's probably going to be some more negative outcomes as well. So I think we're becoming more aware as a community of the importance of harmony in our lives. And I think overall, I think we'll probably improve. Yeah.
I completely agree with that, though. I think there is such a bigger movement of people becoming educated about these different things, and that will happen. But at the same time, I think people are going to get even more caught up in all the chaos of everything as well. So it's going to be this very divided sort of thing that happens, I think.
I think so. But I think people are recognising more and more, because we lost a lot of harmony. I think people are going to be moving back to harmony.
That would be great.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. What would you say is your personal definition of happiness?
People. I love, I think the thing that gives most happiness is giving. Not giving like sort of money or anything, but giving of oneself. I think that makes you feel good. It's a very selfish thing to do in lots of ways, because it makes you feel good. It makes you happy, but that's the thing that sustains me, doing something that's positive for my environment. Yeah, doing something that helps my environment, basically.
I couldn't agree more, and I say that often. I can get caught up in my head and all these different things or ambitions, but then just going in when I've done mental health talks and all those, whenever I do that, I walk off and just feel I've never felt better, and you just feel, gets you out of your head, you get perspective, you feel good for helping people. And that's what I say to people a lot of the time. Well, I'm probably doing it just as much to help people as for my own selfish reasons that I want to feel good. But you know what? Why don't we all take that stance? Because
that's right.
If that's what it takes to make us go and do things that's going to help each other, then so be it. It's a good enough reason.
Yeah, it's absolutely
it really
the
is.
the most sustaining thing I think I can do is to do something positive around me. And it's
Yeah,
not getting stuff in, but the way, I mean, I believe in karma too. You give out, you get back. That's just what happens if we're lucky.
for
It
sure.
happens like that.
I think it eventually does, though. Yeah. So the final one here. What would you say is the most courageous thing you've ever done?
Oh, there's. I think I look back
I'm
on
sure
my
there's
life.
lots. Yeah.
I think when you look back on your life, you think, oh wow, I didn't realize I was being so courageous. But I think one of the things that people were really stunned by was when I left a legal career to go and be a student again and study sleep. Everyone thought I was a bit crackers, really, and and it was courageous because I was a single mum, didn't have much money, and I went from a relatively well-paying career to nothing really. So it took a lot of courage, but look, wow,
I think,
it's
yeah.
paid back in spades. So
And I think it's a really nice way to end it, and it's a good message for anyone listening to this as well. And I think that's amazing that you went and were able to do that, because I know when you are, especially in a career like law, where it's a lot of people aspire to get into that, and you would have had so many people telling you, "What are you doing? You're crazy. You're going to undo all these years of study and work and etc. etc." Family see that as you're crazy. And to be able to have that, follow your gut and listen to your intuition and do what you want to do, is a lot of people don't go and make the step that you made. So I think, well, I hope people hearing that can, try and take that on board to think, okay, what's my gut telling me? And maybe I could follow that, and I don't have to listen to what people around me are telling me. I have the right to make my own decision, and there's no right or wrong. It's about what's going to make me feel good and be best for me long term.
yeah, look, Nick, I love the fact you said follow your gut. I think the gut brain is really important, and we're recognizing the connection between the gut and the brain more and more, aren't we? Just
We
with the
are.
gut biome, the flora, and how one informs the other. And I think we do need to listen more to our gut brain, and often because our rational brain up here goes, no, no, be careful, be careful, but your gut brain is telling you something really strong. And it does take a lot of courage, and I'm sure you've sort of jumped off the cliff, and wow, you don't know where you're going to end up, but what an exciting trip.
Exactly. It's definitely more exciting.
Yeah, that's right.
We never know where we're going to end up, so you may as
No,
well
that's right. Yeah.
do it, yeah, in following something you love doing. So thank you so much for coming and chatting to me again. I really appreciate, I know you're busy, and it means a lot that you've made the time to come and have this chat. I know this is going to help so many people. It's helped me massively just hearing all of this. So yeah, thank you so much for coming and having the chat today.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Nick, and thank you for being so interested in something I'm passionate about. So that's great. So thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for listening to the latest episode of Move Your Mind. We really could not do this without the support of each and every one of you. It would mean the world to us if you could subscribe to the YouTube channel and share it with as many friends as you can. If you want to hear the audio episodes of the podcast, you can find them on Acast, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. All you have to do is look up Move Your Mind with Nick Bracks. And if you want to dive deeper, and you can subscribe to my website, nickbracks.com. Comes with a free PDF and tip sheet. And if you want to dive even deeper, we have programs at nickbracks.com/courses. So once again, thanks for the support, and I hope you all have a great day.